hard for us to do in this class period. The next best thing, which actually will help you a lot, is to really read these passages carefully. So one of the things that will also tend to happen, again, when you're on hour 3 of an exam, and it's even hotter than this room is that who here's ever read something for school, and then you realize like a page later that your eyes have been going over this, and that you haven't understood or remembered a single word that you said? Who's experienced that? Yeah, so everyone's had that. Really, you have very limited time on the test, and so doing that's actually really dangerous on the test. But it's really easy for that to happen to you. So one of the biggest things that you want to train to improve reading comprehension is your ability to stay focused on the passage and not let that thing happen, to really make sure that you understand what's being written. And we'll talk about over the course of this class techniques for that, like how you're going to actually keep your head in the game and stay in these passages, even when they get insufferably boring. Then sometimes they get really, really boring. That's it on the reading section. It's just those two types, just passages and just sentence completion, which people think of as vocabulary. Next section we'll talk about is the writing section. So the writing section is strange. The writing section is 2 parts, or 2 types of things. It has an essay, which we talked about is always that first, and then it has multiple choice questions. The writing section was added in, a little bit of history, was added in 2005. It was added because the University of California system said that they would stop using the SAT for admissions if they didn't add an essay and a writing portion to the SAT. The University of California system has several million students in it. And this was actually a financial thing, which is that if the University of California stopped requiring the SAT and instead went to the SAT was going to lose all of the money from people who took the test. And also now 1 million students were going to switch over to taking the ACT, which probably meant that other students were going to follow as well. So it's less than 1 million, it can't be that big, but a big chunk of SAT test taking students. The University of California system is very influential. So the SAT added the writing section. The writing section is probably the strangest. It's probably the least, here's the good news and the bad news. It's probably the least valid because it's the easiest to train for. So over the course of this class, it is one of the sections that you will improve your score on the most if you put disciplined energy into it. The writing section you can really improve quite effectively by putting in focused energy on it. So while it's not great from a testing point of view, that's really, really good news for all of you. So let's take a look at some questions.
This one is half and turned it funny.
Great. Okay, let's take a look at page 145. And since I get that one, why don't we put this out here? Do you mind, folks mind this? Okay. And I'm going to have it oscillate a little bit here. Alright. What this does mean is everyone will need to hold on to their books as everything goes by. Okay, so page 145. And Victor, can you walk us through what we're seeing just in terms of the question here? So questions 1, 2, and 3, visually what do they look like here?
Alright, so there's just like one sentence
Yep.
that asks a question relevant to the, wait, no, not really.
So just visually first. So there's one sentence we see. And what do you see in that sentence?
You see it?
Yeah, what does it look like?
It's just a short sentence.
Yeah.
Oh, part of it's underlined?
Part of it's underlined, yep. So there'll be one underline. And then it's followed by 5 answer choices, right? So, questions. Okay. So what are they asking us to do here on this section?
So you're going to read the sentence and then the underlined section portion portion and then sort of choose the option that oh my god, I can't talk today. That's grammatically correct.
Yeah, so this is actually really important. What do the directions say specifically that you're going to do? The last sentence, the direction. Read that for us.
Yeah, your selection should result in the most effective sentence, clearly emphasized without awkwardness or ambiguity.
Right. So they're looking for you to create the most effective sentence out of the choices presented. So what you said is the grammatically correct sentence, and I just want to talk about a slight difference between that and what they're asking for. So it's the most effective sentence. So to be effective, it does have to be grammatically correct. But there's other things going on here, which is concision. Is it short? Awkwardness, is it awkward? What's the best way to state this? One of the things to note is they'll trick you with this. So what I generally find here is that what most students tend to do here is use your ear to hear what sounds best. That works really well for you up to about a 600, maybe a 650. Most students can sort of get into that range by using their ear if, as most of you have been speaking English for most of your life, you've been to reasonably good schools, you've had a reasonably good education, you can sort of hear what is the grammatically correct thing. Above that, what they deliberately do and the way they make questions hard is by giving you sentences where there are choices that sound correct but are grammatically incorrect. Because there's a couple of things that we do conversationally that are grammatically incorrect that sound really commonly correct to us. So it's very common on a difficult question that all of the options will sound terrible. Like they'll all sound awkward, and none of them will be the way that good writing would teach you to phrase the question. But there will be one that is grammatically correct and less awkward. But you'll be tempted to choose one that is grammatically incorrect but sounds less awkward to you because that's the way we talk. A really common example of this is, since we don't like to use genders anymore, we'll often say things, like when a student goes to the store, they might find something on sale there. That's not grammatically correct because student is singular and they is plural. But we talk like that nowadays because we don't like to say he or she. But what they used to do is they just assumed everyone was a man. So what they used to just say is like, when a student goes to the store, he's likely to find something on sale there. And we don't speak like that anymore. So we introduced this grammatically incorrect thing in the English language as common usage. All right, this is what most of these are. This is the biggest part of the section. That 10 minutes at the end of the test is all these kinds of questions. So we'll spend a lot of time practicing these kind of questions. There is another question called identifying sentence errors, which we can look at on 153. And Juliana, you want to explain to us what we're seeing on, actually, let's get a whole page now. Let's go to 161. So here's another one visually that's just really important to identify visually. So Juliana, can you explain what are we seeing in the questions here that gives us visual clues? Because these questions look really different.
There's a sentence, it has a sentence, and then parts of it are underlined with letters.
There's a letter underneath each one. And what's at the end of the sentence?
No error.
Yeah, so there's always a choice E that's no error on these kinds. These are called identifying sentence errors. People tend to think of them as exactly the same as improving sentences, which you just saw. They don't test quite the same thing. That's why it's really important when you're looking at these to visually have in your brain how these kinds of questions are different. So what is different about these, just structurally, than the other questions we've looked at? So What's different these than the prior ones we looked at?
They don't give you they tell you which ones might be wrong, but you have to choose. But the other one, they give you part of the sentence and you have to decide.
Right. So, exactly. So they don't give you answers. So the other one we said that you're trying to create the most effective sentence. That's not possible on these questions because there is no option to create a more effective sentence. So as a result, these are entirely about being grammatically correct. There's a little bit of stuff in here that's like usage type questions and common usage, but this is not ones where you're going to correct awkwardness on these questions. And what students are really tempted to do on this type of question is to correct places where it's awkward. And again, that's the way the SAT will create difficult questions. Part of the way they create difficult questions is they give you grammatically correct but awkward sentences that you would never say. And what students tend to do is try and correct the awkwardness rather than the grammar. So it's really important to remember between these two questions, one's about grammar, one's not. And I apologize, we're not really learning a lot of content today, so I know this is not the most scintillating. One question type left, which is improving paragraphs. Let's take a look on page 178. All right, take a second to acclimate yourself here. So I'm going to ask someone to describe this, and pretty me describe how this is different than the other question type we saw. I'll know, remember when the writing section here, not the reading section. So, Tiffany, why don't you visually walk us through what we're seeing here?
So on the other one, there's like 1, 5, 10, so it's every 5.
Yep.
But this one, there's it's like the same. There's a passage, but before each sentence, there's like a number.
Yep.
So like every sentence number.
Yep. And then what follows?
The questions and well, some of them have like they take like a sentence from there and they like italicize it.
Yep. So this is improving paragraphs. This is the last part of the writing section. Students tend to confuse this with the passage-based. Okay.
That's for you.
Yeah.
That's a lot of fun. It feels very like being a teacher like in like the 1800s. We could only at the end of class, and it's not a book, so I'm much more okay with this. I guess the other thing is like if someone's bad, I should I could actually wrap your knuckles. I could wrap your knuckles with this. It's really fun.
Actually, that used to be beating students in the old days in China.
Yeah, I know we go knuckles wrapping and yeah. If you, I'm not gonna do that. So we're talking about improving paragraphs, and the difference here on improving paragraphs is people tend to think this is another paragraph followed by questions, so it looks like reading. Edward, what would you say reading we were testing on mostly? Comprehension, exactly. Here, this is a writing thing. So what do you imagine they'd be testing on a writing section versus a reading section? Say again? Grammar? Yep. So this is much more about grammar and writing good paragraphs effectively and how well written things are, not your understanding of it. This always comes at the end of that long writing section. So you'll notice there's one writing section in the main body of the test that is 35 questions long. This one section here always comes at the end of that section. It's always 6 questions long. My experience with this is that it's not very difficult for students if you have enough time. So this is largely just a timing. Okay. Do you have enough time to get to this? So this is really about pacing. If you have enough time, you'll do fine on this. We won't spend a lot of time on improving paragraphs because again, I found that for students it's not that challenging. As long as you pace properly. So that's all of the reading and writing questions on the test.
So does this factor in like the time it takes to actually read the passage before you answer?
No. So what I have written on here, these average time per question, don't take into account the time it takes to read the passage. So if it's a 12-question passage, and I say it's about a minute, that's 12 minutes in total reading the passage and looking at the questions. Again, to give you a sense, we'll talk about reading strategies. What students are usually uncomfortable doing, but I find works best, is to read the passage slower and then answer questions. This is different than probably training you've gotten for the MCAS, where in my experience, MCAS and tests like that, it's very, very easy to just read the questions first and then just read the relevant part of the passage. The SAT knows that. Similarly, you can probably get up to about a 500 or 600 score with that strategy. Very, very hard to get beyond that, because they will ask you questions that require you to have absorbed the entire passage. So you will need for higher level scores to be able to do that. The only time that I tend to suggest that students do that is if they really learn English later in life. It's pretty much not the case for anyone here. You all basically sound as sort of native English speakers. So that for almost all of you, deep reading is going to be the right approach to getting the best scores. Other questions? Let me talk a little bit about how we're going to run this class. So we're going to run this a little bit differently than sort of traditionally done this, in part because we have the benefit of what I and many others believe is some really, really great software to help us out. So we're going to be using the technology that my company has developed as part of this class. And what I'm going to ask is your permission for us to do a little bit of an experiment. So we built this software and this website to really work in conjunction with private tutoring. So this is designed to be a private tutoring tool that I would like to use as part of this class. So we're going to use the company and the website is called Testive. And we're going to integrate that pretty extensively into the class. What it's going to allow you to do is a couple of things. It's going to give us a chance to give you extra content and practice. It's going to allow me to see where all of you stand, so that each one of you can just be working on the areas that are right for you. So if you're really strong in one area but not strong in another, my expectation is that the class, different people in the class are going to be working on different things. Let me show you a little bit about what the software looks like, and that'll help us out.
So that's your...
Notice before I couldn't get it started when I had the screen up. Now that I don't have the screen up, I can't stop it. Also worth noting, I collect SAT-related, like pop cultural references and things like that. So if you see any like clips in movies or on television about the SAT, please let me know. I hold on to those. So this is the tool that we're going to be using, and I'll set up the website for this afterwards, but you can get to it at testive/SAT. And let me show you a little bit about what it looks like. I'm going to log into my account, although what I'm going to ask you to do for homework this week is go and create an account. All you need is your email address. Note, I don't use my account very well, so let me just give you a little bit of a tour of this. We'll mostly be working here on the reading and writing sections. There are 3 sections on the test, and what you're going to do next week is you're going to take a model test. So you're going to take a full-length test out of this blue book. And what you're going to do afterwards is enter your scores into this website, and I'm going to show you how to do that here. And that's going to calibrate all of the questions on it. So for instance, on here I have a 430 on writing. I did a very bad job on this test. But you see it's calibrated. These are all of the different types of writing questions that we've seen. So this is the different types of like categories they ask you: verbs and idioms, run-on, meaning, pronouns, modifiers, parallelism. Now what the system will do for each one of you is it will actually figure out your overall writing score. Okay. And then how you do in each of these categories. So what this says, if the entire test were just verb questions, this student would get a 440 on the writing section. And for all of you, there's going to be different areas that you're going to be stronger and weaker in. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use this so that all of you can work on just the sections that you're individually weak in. And what the system does is it just asks you questions right at the edge of your ability level. So if you're if I'm a 500 scorer, I'm just going to get questions that are 500 level questions in verbs. That way I can work on not questions that are too hard and not questions that are too easy, but questions that are right at the edge of my ability level. And what we found is that this helps students get better faster because you're just working on questions right at the edge. The experiment that we're going to do is I'm going to ask you to do your work and your homework on here. And then in class, what we're going to do each week is that I'm probably going to teach a short lecture on a topic that seems to be generally an area of struggle for the class, or something that I think is a really important strategy that everybody needs to know. And then probably for the second half of class, we'll do some small group work where I will meet with each one of you, and I'll probably pull each of you aside individually to work on an individualized study plan for you. So each one of you is going to have a very different experience in this class of actually what content that you're studying based on where your weak areas are. And that's because we found that for most students, your biggest score gains on the SAT actually come from you've been exposed to all of these materials before, but there was either a teacher that you had one year who you didn't like, or a week that you sort of weren't paying attention in class. And all of you probably have a couple of gaps in your content knowledge, like somewhere that you didn't learn as well. And that filling in that gap is where you're going to get the fastest score improvement. That gap, as you might imagine, is different for each one of you. After that, we'll sort of get some initial gains from the gap. After that, it's really just a lot about work, which is recognizing your own mistakes and working to improve them. And I'll talk about how we use the system to do this. What's relevant for by next week is when you do the model test, you'll notice that over here on the side, can't quite see this, this says grade Blue Book test. So this is where you're going to enter in your Blue Book test answers. And you all have the second edition because there really is only the second edition out right now. The first edition is like 5 years old, so you don't see that around very much. If any of you, though, you should be buying new Blue Books. So I guess everyone has one. I just want to make sure yours isn't like from a sibling, but it isn't from like a sibling or a hand-me-down or something like that. Just double check. If it's really old, like if you have a much older sibling, it might be the first edition, and it's actually important to use the second edition for this class so that we're all on the same page. Everyone here is looking at the second edition right now. They're apparently coming out with a third edition in August. And then you enter in whichever test that you have. Let's say you take test 1. Oh, good. I'm glad you think that's cute. And then just imagine it looks much like an answer sheet for every section. This is all the sections of the test. Why, based on what we said, would this be missing section 1? Yep. And why would this be missing section 4? Yes, experimental. So that's the experimental section here. So when you take the test in the book, they actually don't have the experimental sections. So every test in here is